dive into program support type stuff. So this is, there's not a lot here that, so you're not going to probably say, wow, we can replace everything that we're doing with free tools. But there are some interesting free and low-cost tools that can be kind of adjuncts to your work. Google Maps and Google Earth. So most people, I think, are probably familiar with this. If you're looking to map things, like it'd be really interesting for advocacy campaigns. For instance, I know an organization in, I believe it was in Georgia, who mapped out the locations of the, in theory, random roadblocks for immigration paper checks. Or immigration status checks, which were not shockingly all completely clustered around low-income neighborhoods. So it can be a really interesting tool to get a sense of what a cluster looks like geographically. Also simply to, for instance, plot all your clients. It can be a useful thing. Tableau Public is a relatively new and really interesting tool to think about. It is a data visualization tool, so it'll create charts, graphs, maps, and it's designed to allow you to kind of stack them up, to have multiple charts and graphs, and to add some text or copy, add, you know, a particular image, so to kind of create infographics. But it's going to require some design knowledge to get it going. It's there is a free version, which is actually quite powerful, but it's going to, as you can see looking at it, it's not the world's most straightforward thing. It's going to take some learning curve to get up and running with it. Infogram, with this weird dot in the middle, is kind of the almost the opposite of Tableau, or you could use it in combination of Tableau. It basically has some templates that allows you to put in a chart or graph or image in order to make a very simple and decent looking infographic. They're likely to look somewhat canned. So there's probably only about 20 templates or so. So you're going to, people who know Infogram are going to recognize your template. But there is some basic options around customizing. All right. So any thoughts or comments, Ken or Brian, on kind of this idea of mapping data visualization, either tools or kind of thoughts of applications of this into the legal aid world?
No, I really like Infogram, both from an advocacy perspective in taking some complex things and putting them into a nice visual package. It's also very easy to use. Although I have a little bit of a stats background, I have absolutely no design skills whatsoever, and they can make my stuff look really nice.
Yes. Yeah, it has a really nice templating format where kind of if you know kind of where you're going, it'll make it look really snazzy for you.
Yeah, no, I think I don't do infographics, but on the mapping end, Google does have for the premium editions of the mapping software, they do have a Google Grants program where they will grant the more advanced versions as well, so you can actually do like really solid GIS beyond the point mapping, which Flora showed as an application. So for the more sophisticated stuff, you have to get a Google grant, but if you're on this call, you're probably a nonprofit, and it shouldn't be that much of a big process to go through.
Yeah, and actually, so a couple of the things that, in fact, that we've already talked about and will continue to talk about require a Google grant. So let's just talk a little bit about that process. So Google has, it's like a 2-page application which requires virtually no work. You could probably throw it together in an hour from stuff you have on hand. And it is not a competitive process. It is rather them vetting to make sure that they don't see anything basically wrong with your mission. So it's hard to imagine what you could be doing as a legal aid organization where Google would not approve you for a Google grant. And in fact, because it's such an easy application and the upsides are so big, so it'll get you Google Grants, it will get you premier versions of Google Maps, and we're going to be talking about a number of other things upcoming, so things like Google Ads and Google Analytics. It's absolutely well worth applying for everyone. So just take the hour, go apply for a Google Grant, or for the Google Grants program. They've got about a 30 to 60 day turnaround time now, so it's not an immediate gratification scenario. But I would be pretty surprised if they turn down any of you guys. So they do seem to care about both strong advocacy positions, politically aligned organizations in either dimension, and religiously affiliated organizations. Those are the type of organizations that tend to have a little more trouble getting through. But legally, it's a pretty non-controversial cause. All right. Let's talk about kind of some things so we're kind of moving off of data visualization and some of the things that can help kind of in programmatic kind of communications and thinking about kind of legal matters. So here's Google Translate. This is the actual app version of it. There's also an online version. It's actually, if you haven't fiddled with Google Translate, it is a surprisingly usable. It doesn't provide perfect so it's usable if you want to understand somebody or you want to understand what something says in another language. You certainly don't want to use it to translate your materials and put it up. The translations are a little weird, but are perfectly readable. So this is an interesting option for communicating potentially with people who speak another language, who are literate in another language, or to understand what something says in another language.
Yeah, and one note on that, we had a webinar last year where a legal aid organization used the API and Google Translate as the first line translation, and they were looking at it cutting out about half the time they needed in order to translate things. They then had an on-staff professional do the final, but it was definitely useful in that capacity and very, very affordable.
Yeah, that's a great point, that it's going to get you slightly weird translations, but if you have somebody on staff who speaks the language, a weird translation is a much easier place to start than just something in some entirely different language. So yeah, thanks, Brian. I know that document management is a big need for a lot of you guys, and this is one of the areas in which I think that there is the mirage of free software. So OWL or Knowledge Tree, open source systems that offer complicated, possibly too complicated, functionality to manage documents. But this is a realm in which this really may be a pit of time. Ken, am I right in thinking that you've had experience in looking at these tools?
Experience, nightmares, trauma. No, I think that within tools like this, it's really on the front end, just the planning and the requirements discussions are just so critical, because our litigation unit in particular was looking at document management solutions. Once they realized what commercial would cost, we're like, all right, why don't we look at a couple of open source solutions? One, I think that even with the hand holding, there wasn't the realization of like, oh my goodness, this isn't going to thoroughly integrate in Microsoft Office. And also, I think that there wasn't a custom or a work culture of the check-in, check-out process. Then we get to the tool part, where, like, let's say something like OWL, where it's not clear whether it's going to continue to be maintained. It was a relatively solid product up to about, I'd say, a year and a half ago. It now seems to be kind of in limbo. Knowledge Tree is a commercially supported product, so you can buy the commercial version or the open source version. The commercial version has like a lot better bells and whistles, better Microsoft Office integration, but the open source version is kind of a bear of an install and doesn't integrate as gracefully as I think was the expectation of the end user. So yeah, and I think that's kind of a telling tale where the commercially supported version is kind of like a starter drug, if you will, where, or like I guess he's sticking with the more sanitary puppy analogy, where it's like that very, very cute puppy that will like do X, Y, and Z in the future, or like maybe a work dog puppy that's really cute, and at some point, once you've invested in it, it's going to hurt your sheep for you or whatever you have. As a city person, I'm not really aware what that means. On the other hand, you have Owl, which is kind of like this free dog that, you know, might get some things done, but once again, long term, something like Owl could be a huge time sink, like it was for us when we rolled out Owl, and I think that for me, the big reservation when we did that trial was the fact that I didn't know, as a technologist, I didn't know what the long-term support on it would be, even if it's community support, because there are some community-supported projects like Drupal that have solid community support. Owl is unfortunately one of those products that doesn't, kind of like Kamai, the time management tool that we also had a big snafu with. Yeah.
Now, Ken makes a great point about having community support. Projects like WordPress that has an incredible community is very easy to use, but some of the smaller ones, if the community is not there, you either have to have a techie who knows it, or I would avoid it. Community matters a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that it's, so Ken has brought up a ton of great points around that apply to a lot of open source products in particular. I think it's a mistake to think about open source products being free as in beer, you know, free to acquire. They may be, but it definitely makes sense to put them side by side with other comparable products that you would pay for, to see if over the long run it makes sense to buy something up front that may be less effort and hassle and support in the long run. So, not to say that open source tools aren't sometimes a fantastic option. They're just, I don't think it's useful to think of them as free, because they're often they're costs in different ways. All right, a couple other tools. So Dictation, the installed version is actually, unfortunately, fairly expensive, but they have a free app, which is, I believe, so it's definitely on the iPhone. I believe there's also an Android version, which will allow you to turn speech into written text, record from your mobile phone. It is the same Dragon stuff. So it is good, but not probably the greatest thing ever in terms of dictation.
Yeah, I use Dragon Naturally Speaking currently, which is the full software version, and I've tried the Dictate. The Dictate works on a very basic level. I wouldn't use it for large pieces of text, but it is definitely a solid, nice version.
Yep. And it's trainable, so you can invest a lot of effort in it, and it gets better. But then it's a question as to how much effort is worthwhile and how much dictation you're going to do. One of the people on staff here does a lot of her writing that way, because in fact she's just a super oral person, and she is able to write better by speaking than by actually typing. All right, Days From. So here's another app which is free. So to be able to just quickly tell somebody, all right, so we're going to check back in 60 days on this application. What date is that? It'll find, you know, what is the date 30 days in the future, what is the date 30 days in the past. Kind of a simple thing, but not trivial, but simply by leaping through your calendar. And a pure legal aid one. So LawStack is another app. So it's a reference of a bunch of the core pieces of legal content that you can take with you on the road, reference. It is also completely free. So this is the type of thing that is really and truly free if this is a thing that is useful to you. Other thoughts, Ken and Brian, on things that people should be thinking about in the realm of free and low cost, things for program delivery before we venture into external communications?
No.
I think we're doing well here.
Great. Terrific.